Kimveer Gill's story, culminating in the Dawson College shooting on September 13, 2006, is a long and deeply layered narrative shaped by childhood detachment, adolescence marked by emotional fragmentation, early adult isolation, and an increasingly obsessive immersion into violent fantasies that flourished in the darkest corners of the internet. And to fully understand the magnitude of what occurred that day, one must begin long before he ever walked into the campus cafeteria with loaded firearms. Born on July 9, 1981 in Quebec to Indian immigrant parents, Gill grew up in a quiet suburban environment in Laval where his parents worked diligently to provide structure, discipline, and opportunity. Yet in spite of their efforts, he struggled to connect with peers and often drifted through school without forming deep friendships or participating in activities that might have grounded him socially. Instead, he gravitated towards solitary pursuits like video games, heavy metal music, and brooding in his bedroom where he spent countless hours alone, developing a simmering dissatisfaction with life that he rarely expressed directly. Classmates who remembered him from elementary and secondary school described him as physically present but emotionally distant, someone who sat quietly at the back of the classroom and rarely offered input. And although he did not exhibit overt aggression in his early years, his journals and online posts later revealed that he internalized grievances, perceived slights, and minor conflicts in ways that deeply affected his self-image, gradually forming a worldview shaped by resentment and alienation. As he grew older, Gill's fascination with weapons surfaced, beginning with fantasy-based interest, video games, action movies, military imagery, but over time evolving into a genuine desire to own real firearms and master how to use them. He frequented shooting ranges, meticulously studied firearm manuals, and became increasingly comfortable handling weapons, which he viewed not only as tools of power but as symbolic extensions of his darkening identity. Despite his parents' attempts to guide him towards stable employment and social interaction, he drifted through a series of short-lived jobs, struggled with authority, and spent long stretches unemployed, retreating deeper into isolated corners of the internet where communities reinforced his growing nihilism. His online presence, especially on sites like Vampire Freaks, painted a vivid portrait of his psychological disintegration. He posted photos of himself wearing black trench coats, long boots, gloves, and sunglasses, often posing with his firearms in militaristic stances. He wrote lengthy journal entries fantasizing about death, violence, and revenge, and he identified himself with usernames and descriptions that hinted at a desire to be remembered for destruction rather than creation, repeatedly framing the world as a place unworthy of human kindness and proclaiming that life itself was meaningless. These journals, later examined by investigators, revealed a disturbing infatuation with past school shooters, whom he admired for their willingness to act out violent fantasies against the societies they believed had wronged them. Over time, his writings grew more explicit, expressing a cold determination to one day commit a violent act, though he masked these statements in vague terms that made them appear like dark poetry rather than fully formed plans, allowing his intentions to go unnoticed by those around him. By the time 2006 arrived, Gill was 25 years old, living with his mother, unemployed, and spending nearly all his time online or at the shooting range, his days blending together in a repetitive cycle of late-night internet browsing, journal writing, weapon maintenance, and solitary meals, a life that lacked external structure or meaningful human engagement. On the morning of September 13, 2006, he woke up with an unusually fixed sense of purpose, described later by investigators as a calmness that can occur when an individual has resolved internally to carry out extreme violence. He dressed carefully in the outfit he had long envisioned: a black trench coat, black combat boots, black cargo pants, gloves, and a t-shirt with stark white lettering reading "Gothic Storm," a phrase that symbolized both his aesthetic identity and his internal chaos. He selected his weapons with deliberate intention: a Beretta CX-4 Storm semi-automatic carbine, chosen for its accuracy and compact design, a Glock pistol loaded and ready as a secondary weapon, and a shotgun left in the car in case he needed it. He loaded multiple magazines, checked the grip and balance of each firearm, and placed them carefully into his gear so they would be easily accessible. Before leaving, he spent a few minutes at his computer, glancing at his blog entries, possibly rereading the messages he had posted only hours earlier, and absorbing the finality of his decision. He stepped out of his home carrying his equipment bag and got into his black Pontiac Sunfire, a car that would later become an emblem of his final journey, and began driving toward downtown Montreal. The drive itself was uneventful, but investigators believed he was experiencing a cold, detached calmness, the kind described by psychologists as dissociative focus, in which individuals preparing for extreme violence feel as though they are observing rather than participating in their own actions. When he arrived at Dawson College at approximately 12:41 p.m., the campus was bustling with students enjoying their lunch break, talking, laughing, walking to and from classes, unaware that a man wearing a black trench coat was stepping out of his vehicle with a fully loaded semi-automatic carbine visible in his hands. Several students outside the building saw him and froze in confusion, unsure whether this was a prank, a photo shoot, or an actual threat. But the moment he raised the weapon and fired his first shot into the crowd, the atmosphere instantly transformed from normal midday activity to sheer chaos. Screams erupted as students fled in different directions, some tripping over benches, some dropping their bags, some running into the building to escape. And Gill walked forward slowly, firing additional rounds without rushing, his posture eerily controlled. He entered the main building through the front doors and immediately encountered a large stream of students moving through the hallways. Many thought at first that they were hearing construction noises or something heavy dropping, but as the second and third gunshots echoed through the corridors, the realization of danger spread rapidly, causing students to run, bump into walls, and shove frantically through doorways as their survival instincts took over. Gill moved toward the cafeteria, the largest open space on the ground floor, where approximately 200 students were eating, studying, or socializing. The moment he entered, he began firing into the open area, causing dozens of students to dive beneath tables, flip chairs over for makeshift cover, or attempt to crawl toward side exits. The sound inside the cafeteria was deafening, a mixture of gunshots, screams, shattering glass, and overturned metal furniture scraping against the floor. Witnesses later described the terror of not knowing where the shooter was aiming, whether he would come closer, or whether they would be the next target. Some students huddled together under tables, clutching their hands over their ears, praying he would not see them. Others pressed themselves against the ground, trying to make their bodies as small as possible, while a few brave individuals attempted to help those who had already been shot, pushing napkins or cloth against wounds to slow the bleeding. Gill advanced deeper into the cafeteria, moving with a chilling deliberateness, pausing only to aim more carefully or adjust his grip. He fired at students who were attempting to crawl away, at those who were standing up in shock, and at those who had not reacted quickly enough. Among the victims was 18-year-old Anastasia D'Souza, who was struck critically and collapsed to the ground as her friends tried desperately to drag her to safety while blood pooled on the floor around her. Meanwhile, outside the building, Montreal police officers who happened to be nearby responded within minutes, rushing inside with weapons drawn, aware that every second counted. Their rapid arrival would later be credited with preventing a massacre on the scale of Columbine or Virginia Tech. As they entered the cafeteria, they immediately spotted Gill, who turned his weapon toward them and fired. The officers used pillars, overturned tables, and the structural layout of the room for cover, advancing in short bursts while yelling for students to stay down and keep crawling out of danger. The confrontation between Gill and the officers intensified, with bullets ricocheting off walls and embedding into chairs, leaving splintered debris scattered across the cafeteria floor. At one point, Gill climbed onto a small elevated platform inside the room, giving himself a partial vantage point over the fleeing students, but this also exposed him more clearly to the police. One officer managed to fire a well-aimed shot that struck Gill in the arm or side. Accounts differ slightly, but the impact was enough to force him to stumble and lose some control over his weapon. Realizing he was cornered, injured, and unable to continue his attack effectively, Gill raised the barrel of his carbine to his head and pulled the trigger, ending his life within seconds. When officers reached him, they disarmed him quickly, unaware at first that he had taken his own life. They then began directing paramedics into the building, stepping over shattered glass, spilled food, backpacks with their contents scattered across the floor, and pools of blood where students had been struck. The cafeteria looked like the aftermath of a battlefield. Trays overturned, books soaked in spilled drinks, bullet casings littered across the tiles, chairs toppled in every direction. Outside, survivors sat on the grass or sidewalks, crying, shaking, hugging one another, calling their families, while ambulances lined the street and paramedics rushed the most seriously injured to hospitals. Anastasia de Souza did not survive her injuries, and news of her death spread quickly through the community, intensifying the grief and shock. Investigators who later searched Gill's home found extensive evidence of his mindset in the weeks, months, and years leading up to the shooting. They discovered diaries filled with rage, despair, fantasies of death, meticulous notes about past shootings, and repeated statements expressing his belief that society was corrupt, hypocritical, and deserving of punishment. They found photographs he had staged of himself pointing guns at the camera, notebooks where he had written about wanting to die in a dramatic act that would make people remember him, and browser history showing he had studied prior shootings in intimate detail. His writings did not contain a single triggering event but instead revealed a long accumulation of resentment, loneliness, self-loathing, and fascination with destruction, forming a psychological storm that built slowly over years. In the aftermath, Montreal and all of Canada entered a period of national mourning and debate. Survivors dealt with long-term trauma, recurring nightmares, fear of crowded places, and difficulty returning to normal school life. Dawson College implemented support programs, counseling services, memorials, and security measures. Families of the injured endured months of surgeries, rehabilitation, and emotional recovery, while Anastasia de Souza's family mourned her as a bright, ambitious young woman whose life had been senselessly taken. The tragedy sparked national conversations on gun laws, mental health intervention, online radicalization, and the invisible suffering experienced by socially isolated individuals. Experts analyzed Gill's writings, behaviors, and personal history, concluding that he had drifted into a self-reinforcing cycle of alienation and violent fantasy. And although he had left many warning signs, they had existed mostly online, unnoticed by those capable of intervening. His story became a painful reminder of how someone living quietly in suburban anonymity could harbor a storm of violence beneath the surface. A storm that finally erupted in the cafeteria of Dawson College on that September afternoon, leaving behind grief, trauma, unanswered questions, and a dark chapter in Canadian history.